My husband Romeo sponsored a poor student. While I was away, she sneaked into our house, wore my husband's pajamas, and posted on Facebook, "My big brother's pajamas are so comfortable," all while taunting me in various ways. But I wasn't afraid at all. In just a few rounds, I completely defeated her, leaving her in utter disgrace. Chapter 1. Late at night, I got up to drink some water and couldn't fall back asleep. My husband was sleeping soundly, and I didn't want to disturb him, so I opened Facebook to pass the time. The more I scrolled, the sleepier I got. But just as I was about to put my phone down and go back to bed, I stumbled upon a post that snapped me wide awake. In the picture, a girl was wearing a black men's pajama top, slightly exposing her collarbone, her eyes looking hazy and seductive. That girl was the same student my husband had been sponsoring, even though I had never met her. My husband had shown me a video of her before. In the photo, she no longer had her usual plain appearance, but I recognized her immediately. The background in the photo was unmistakably my bedroom, and the pajamas she was wearing? I recognized them instantly because I bought them for my husband. Then I read the caption, "My big brother's pajamas are so comfortable," and a chill ran down my spine. There were a few comments under her post. I clicked on them and found something quite interesting. Someone commented, "So, did your wish come true?" She replied, "Not yet, but it's getting close." Although the conversation wasn't explicit, I knew this wish had something to do with my husband. By now, I was fully awake. I looked at my husband sleeping next to me and slapped his face hard. He woke up groggily, squinting at me and asking, "What's going on, honey?" I threw my phone in his face. "Look for yourself." My husband rubbed his eyes, looked at the phone, and his face immediately twisted in shock. "What the hell? What's Lucia's deal? Why is she wearing my pajamas and posting pictures like that?" I crossed my arms and glared at him in disgust. "You tell me, how should I know?" He scratched his head, trying to remember. "Oh, wait, I think I know. Babe, remember last month when she said she had nowhere to stay? You were kind enough to let her crash at our place for a night. She probably took the photo then." It all came back to me. That night, my husband and I had gone out, and we didn't return home. She called, saying she had no place to stay. I felt sorry for her, a poor student with no one to rely on, so I kindly let her stay at our place for the night. I never thought I was inviting a wolf into my home. The thought of her wearing my husband's pajamas, lying in our bed, made me feel sick to my stomach. Chapter 2. After this incident, my husband expressed strong disgust toward Lucia. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. "Lucia, what are you trying to do? I sponsored your education because your father helped me once. But that doesn't mean I have any feelings for you. Don't even think about things that aren't yours. If you keep doing inappropriate things like this, don't blame me for cutting ties." When my husband was a child, he was kidnapped by traffickers, and it was Lucia's father who saved him. Over the years, he's helped Lucia's family quite a bit. The phone was on speaker, so I heard Lucia's pitiful response, "I'm sorry, big brother. It's my fault. Is your girlfriend upset? I'll delete the post right away. I don't want to cause you any trouble." Just from these few words, I came to a conclusion. Lucia was a pretentious coquette, and a skilled one at that. My husband responded impatiently, "She's not my girlfriend. She's my wife. We're already married. It's not just her who's upset with what you did. I'm even more upset. She's my treasure, and I can't bear to see her unhappy. Who do you think you are, causing her trouble? You have 1 minute to delete the post, or you'll face the consequences." She apologized immediately and deleted the photo within a minute. I looked at my husband with admiration. No wonder I chose him. He always stays crystal clear in situations like this. The next day, Lucia's parents called to apologize and invited us to dinner. At first, I thought her parents seemed reasonable, but the reality completely shocked me. Chapter 3. Before the dinner, I dressed up carefully, wearing a Chanel suit, carrying a Hermes bag, and putting on flawless makeup. When my husband saw me, he kissed me several times in excitement, and I had to push him away. I dressed up like this to make Lucia feel inferior and back off. Okay? If my makeup got ruined by his kisses, all my effort would have been wasted. My husband drove us to the hotel, where Lucia's family had already arrived. As soon as we walked in, I immediately spotted Lucia. To be fair, she wasn't bad-looking, she just didn't know how to dress, which made her look a bit frumpy. The moment she saw me, her first reaction was to size me up from head to toe. Especially my Hermes bag and the clover necklace on my neck, it was like she couldn't stop staring at them. A few seconds later, she shifted her gaze and smiled at my husband. "Big brother, you're here." She didn't even bother to greet me, which made it hard for me to believe it wasn't intentional. Such a low-level trick. Of course, my husband saw right through it. He immediately introduced me. "Let me introduce my wife, Olivia." She froze for a moment, then smiled and greeted me. "Hello, sister. Nice to meet you." My husband corrected her impatiently. "She's my wife. You should be calling her sister-in-law." Lucia hesitated, her smile turning awkward. "I just thought calling her sister would feel more intimate." "Don't call her sister. My wife is the youngest in her family, and she's not used to being called that." The atmosphere became a bit tense, and Lucia's awkward smile showed she didn't know how to respond. Her parents quickly stepped in to ease the situation. "Lucia, calling her sister-in-law is actually more respectful. Don't say things that don't make sense." As soon as we sat down, Lucia's parents greeted us. "Go ahead and sit down." My husband and I took our seats, but Lucia immediately stood up and squeezed herself next to my husband. She picked up a shrimp and offered it to him, saying, "Brother, try this dish. It's so delicious. Do you remember when you were at our house, and my dad made shrimp for you? You loved it so much back then. You even told me that when you grew up, you'd marry me. Do you remember that?" While she spoke, she threw a challenging look my way. I knew she was intentionally trying to provoke me with those trivial childhood memories. Does she think I'm dead or something? I was just about to strike back, but my husband spoke first. He calmly pushed the dish aside and said coldly to Lucia, "If I remember correctly, I never said anything like that, and even if I did, what's your purpose in bringing it up in front of my wife?" Look at him, he handled it so beautifully that I didn't even have a chance to respond. Lucia swallowed her resentment and forced a smile, explaining, "Oh, no, I was just joking with you, brother." Then she turned to me. "By the way, a few days ago I ran into someone I know, and when we started chatting, I found out he's actually your ex-boyfriend, Eric. He said you almost married him back then." "Oh, what a shame, right?" She looked at me triumphantly, but I ignored her and focused on my husband. This jealous man has always been bothered by my past relationship. He had finally moved on, but Lucia had to bring it up again. Lucia had no idea what kind of storm she was about to unleash from him. Chapter 4. Bang! My husband slammed his chopsticks onto the table, his face dark with anger as he asked Lucia, "So what? You feel it's such a shame? Why don't you go marry him yourself and fix your regret? That way, you won't feel it's such a loss." I watched Lucia calmly, as if none of this had anything to do with me. For a brief moment, Lucia looked panicked, her face turning pale. She bit her lip delicately, her eyes welling up with tears, and cautiously explained, "No, I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking casually." My husband let out a cold, disdainful laugh. "Who brings up someone's ex-boyfriend like that? Today, I trust my wife unconditionally. But if it were anyone else, wouldn't your words have stirred up trouble and caused a fight at home? What exactly are your intentions? Or do you like that Eric?" Lucia shook her head frantically. "No, how could I possibly like him?" My husband gave her a dismissive once-over. "At least you have some self-awareness. After all, Eric has experienced a woman like my wife. How could he possibly be interested in you?" With an expression full of contempt, my husband left Lucia speechless. I couldn't help but feel like laughing, but I thought it might be too mean, so I held it in. But honestly, I didn't think she was innocent at all in this situation. She could have chosen to stay out of trouble, but instead, she picked a fight with me and brought up Eric. She brought this on herself, didn't she? Her parents had been watching the whole time. Seeing their daughter get mocked by my husband, they looked a bit uncomfortable but didn't know how to step in to defend her. Seeing that my husband had vented enough, I gently patted his hand and playfully said, "All right, honey, don't be mad anymore." My husband gave me an apologetic look. "I'm sorry. I really didn't know she would. If you're uncomfortable, we can leave. I'll take you somewhere else to eat." As soon as Lucia's parents heard my husband offer to take me away, they couldn't sit still anymore. Lucia's father, Hudson, stood up, walked over to her, and slapped her across the face. "What's wrong with you? If you can't talk properly, then don't say anything. Making your brother and sister-in-law angry, watch me beat you to death." With that, he slapped her twice more, and her pale face instantly turned red from the blows. I was shocked. My husband held me in his arms, watching them with a calm expression, like he was watching a show, without the slightest intention of stopping it. Lucia held her face, tears streaming down, but she didn't dare to cry out loud. Hudson didn't seem to think he had hit her too hard. He didn't feel sorry for her at all and continued to try to please my husband. "Romeo, your sister didn't know better and upset you. I've already taught her a lesson, so don't take it to heart." Chapter 5. But my husband didn't care to give them any face. He calmly picked up some food, placed it in my bowl, and said nonchalantly, "Uncle, you don't need to apologize to me. Lucia didn't offend me. She offended my wife. And please, remember, my wife is my treasure. Whoever upsets her is upsetting me. My wife has a good temper and doesn't like to make a fuss. But I'm not like that. If Lucia sincerely apologizes to my wife and promises not to make the same mistake again, I might consider letting this go. Otherwise," he gave a small smile, but there was an unmistakable threat behind it. Lucia's family was visibly shaken, nodding repeatedly. Under his pressure, Lucia pitifully apologized to me. "I'm sorry, sister-in-law. I'm young and didn't know any better. Please don't hold it against me." I smiled and replied, "It's all right, little sister. Just make sure next time you don't wear my husband's clothes in our house. After all, my husband has a bit of a cleanliness obsession. That outfit was quite expensive, and he burned it that very night, saying it was too filthy to keep. I really don't know what to do with him." Lucia stood there, her face drained of color, swaying as if she was about to faint. Seeing I was satisfied, my husband added, "All right. Your sister-in-law is generous and doesn't care to hold grudges against you." Lucia stopped sobbing, slowly raising her teary eyes, looking pitiful as she whispered, "Okay, brother, I won't dare do it again." Only then did my husband's expression soften. We continued to eat, though the tension remained between us. Lucia kept sobbing quietly while she ate, but my husband didn't spare her even a glance. As the meal was winding down, Hudson sensed the moment was right and cautiously began, "Romeo, you see, my wife and I have been here for a while, and staying in a hotel for so long isn't ideal, right? How about we buy a department here? What do you think?" Lucia's mother quickly chimed in, "Yes, Romeo. Living in a hotel is so inconvenient compared to a home." I was curious, why were they discussing buying a department with my husband? Then I glanced at him and saw the look of disdain on his face. It hit me instantly. They were expecting him to buy the department. Realizing this, I was filled with displeasure. Over the years, my husband had already spent a considerable amount of money on their family to repay the life-saving favor they had done for him. Lucia's tuition isn't even worth mentioning. The house in her hometown was also bought by my husband. Hudson has a gambling problem, and over the years, he's lost quite a bit of money. Each time, my husband was the one to cover his debts. I never imagined their appetite would grow so large that they would even expect my husband to buy them a department in Beijing. I thought my husband would refuse, but to my surprise, he let out a soft chuckle and agreed, "Sure, Uncle, I'll look into some developments and get you all a department." "Thank you, Romeo. You're such a good kid." Lucia's family immediately expressed their gratitude. Lucia even shot me a smug, provocative look. I glanced at my husband, confused. Was he really going to buy them a house? Sensing my gaze, my husband gave me a reassuring look, signaling me to trust him. There was also a mischievous smile in his eyes. I knew that smile all too well. Every time he planned to outsmart someone, he'd smile just like that. So I immediately understood he was about to pull one over on the Song family. Looking at the hopeful faces of the Song family, I suddenly felt a bit sorry for them, knowing they were about to fall into my husband's trap. Chapter 6. After dinner, the waiter brought the bill. I saw Hudson signaling the waiter to bring the bill to my husband. I was speechless for a moment. They said they were treating us, yet they didn't even want to pay for the meal. What they didn't know was that this restaurant belonged to my dad. I gave the waiter a look, and she immediately understood. Standing firmly in front of Hudson without moving, Hudson was about to ask my husband for help, but I spoke up at just the right moment to cut him off. Honey, I'm a bit tired. Let's go home. My husband looked at me with a doting smile and playfully tapped my nose. Tired already, you little rascal? Let me carry you home. In front of everyone, my husband picked me up in his arms. As we turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Lucia's face, full of jealousy and frustration, as if I had stolen something that rightfully belonged to her. But this was my husband. After all, she was destined to just stand there, helpless, with no way to change things. Once we were in the car, I said to my husband, "Did you see Lucia's expression? She looked like I had just stolen billions from her. She was practically glaring daggers at me." My husband kissed me on the cheek, stroked my hair, and pulled me into his embrace. "She's nothing. Let her jump around for a bit. I'll deal with her and her family all at once when the time comes." I was a bit confused. "Honey, what do you mean? Aren't her parents your saviors? And didn't you say you were going to buy them a department? Why are you talking about settling scores now?" My husband patiently explained. "To be honest, I've suspected for years that Hudson might have been an accomplice in my kidnapping. Otherwise, I don't understand how he rescued me so easily. But since I didn't have any evidence and didn't want to wrong my supposed savior, I never dug too deeply. However, just yesterday, I asked my assistant to investigate again and found out that Hudson is related to the traffickers. I haven't gathered enough evidence yet, so I promised to buy a department as a way to stall them. It all clicked for me. Now I understand. Don't worry, honey, I'll definitely help you keep up the act." He gently stroked my palm. "You don't need to do anything to help me. If you ever feel wronged, just tell me, and I'll deal with them for good. You have no idea." When she mentioned Eric today, I wanted to sew her mouth shut. I quickly reassured him, "Don't act too hastily. If they catch on, it'll be harder to handle. Let's keep pretending for now. And once we have the evidence, we'll turn the tables. You don't have to worry about Eric. You're the only one in my heart now." He seemed satisfied with that, and as I leaned into his embrace, I felt a deep sense of security. The next day at work, I heard that we had a new intern in the company. My colleagues mentioned that the new hire was a relative of the manager, coming to our department for an internship. I was confused. My dad hates nepotism, so how could the manager dare to pull strings right under his nose? "Oh, right, I work at my dad's company, to prepare me to take over in the future." My dad insisted I start from the bottom. That's why no one knows my true identity, and my colleagues freely discuss whatever they want around me. As I was thinking about this, the new intern walked over, and to my surprise, it was Lucia. She's related to the manager? Chapter 7. Lucia walked over with a smug expression, the team leader trailing behind her, bowing and scraping like a servant. My colleagues in the cubicles next to me were whispering, "I don't think she's just a relative of the manager. She's probably the boss's daughter. Look at how the team leader is sucking up to her." Exactly. Better not offend this Lucia in the future. I listened to their conversation as Lucia reached my desk and greeted us. "Hello everyone. I'm Lucia. I'll be your colleague from now on. Please treat me like any regular employee. I hope we can all work well together." See? The way she said that basically confirms she's someone important. She's got to be the boss's daughter. Lucia clearly heard their chatter too, and I noticed a flash of pride in her eyes. She scanned the room, and when her gaze landed on me, her expression instantly changed to one of shock. I smiled and greeted her. "Hello, Lucia." Lucia stammered. "Why are you working here?" "What a joke. It's my own company. Of course I'm working here." I shrugged. "Just think of it as me liking the atmosphere here." Lucia was stunned for a moment, then seemed to regain her confidence. smiling as she said, "Oh, how interesting. Olivia's sister." Since my husband wasn't around, she went back to calling me Olivia's sister. She even added provocatively, "We're at work, so you won't mind me calling you Olivia's sister, right?" I shook my head. Why would I mind? Seeing that Lucia and I seemed to know each other well, the team leader turned to me and said, "Olivia, from now on, you'll be responsible for guiding Lucia. Pay close attention, and if anything goes wrong, it'll be on you." I found it all quite amusing. I can't wait to see how he plans to hold me accountable while working in my company. Chapter 8. I took Lucia to her desk and started explaining her job responsibilities. I was speaking seriously, but I noticed she wasn't responding. When I looked up, she was staring at me with a pitying expression. "Olivia, you've really got it tough, don't you? Is it because my brother doesn't give you much pocket money? Otherwise, with how rich he is, why would you still have to work so hard to earn money?" I suppressed my anger. "I just enjoy working." She clearly didn't believe me. "Sister, don't be so tough. I know you have your reasons. After all, my brother has spent a lot of money on me, paying for my education, buying my family a department, so why would he be stingy with you? Doesn't this show that he doesn't really see you as part of the family?" "Sister, I think you're kind of pitiful." Her eyes looked teary, as if she were truly pitying me, with how saintly she seemed. I thought even the statues of the gods at the temple would step aside for her. I answered her impatiently, "You don't need to worry about me and my husband. You're new here, so focus on learning your job properly. Otherwise, when you get fired, you might not know where to go cry." "Fine. I won't press on your sore spots anymore." "But you don't really think I'm just a lowly intern, do you? Let me tell you, I'm only here to transition. Soon, I'll be your boss," she said smugly, looking at me like I was something dirty. How ridiculous. What else could she be but an intern? Lying to others is one thing, but lying to me, the real boss? Laughable. I was irritated, but remembering my husband's plan, I held back my anger. "Oh, well, I wish you the best in achieving your dreams." After work, my husband came to pick me up in his Porsche. As soon as I got in the car, he leaned over. "My precious, you've worked hard today. Are you tired? Want me to massage your legs?" I put my legs on his lap and ordered, "Of course. I'm exhausted." "You have to keep massaging until I'm satisfied." My husband massaged my legs for a while, and I felt the tension easing. Just as I sat back up, I noticed Lucia standing in front of the car, her eyes red and puffy. Anyone who didn't know better might think I was the mistress, and she was the wife. I was a bit freaked out. How long had she been standing there? Did she just witness me being intimate with my husband? The thought that she might have been spying on us made me shudder. What's wrong with her? Before I could react, my husband honked a few times and lowered the window. "What are you doing standing in front of someone's car? Are you trying to get hit or die? What's wrong with you?" She pitifully replied, "I was just passing by." "Passing by and just standing there? Are you trying to spy on us being intimate? Are you a peeping Tom?" I added fuel to the fire. "Honey, this is so embarrassing. I'm punishing you. You're not allowed to kiss me in public anymore." My husband's face darkened even more as he shouted, "Get lost! Don't let me see you again." Lucia gave me a resentful look before running off with tears in her eyes. I had no idea how she could cry so much every day. Maybe she's been watching too many lessons on being a pretentious coquette. Honestly, I was impressed. I asked my husband, "She's crying like that. Don't you feel sorry for her?" He answered without hesitation, "Why should I? Don't think men are stupid. We know exactly what a pretentious coquette is. She acts that way to make me feel sorry for her and manipulate me. But I'll just provoke her even more so she doesn't get what she wants." I laughed so hard. Who knew my husband was such an expert at spotting a pretentious coquette? I didn't think much of the incident, but the next day at work, rumors about me were flying everywhere. Chapter 9. As soon as I got to work, I noticed my colleagues whispering behind my back. "She's the one who got into the luxury car yesterday." I never would have guessed she's that kind of person. So shameless. I was baffled. Just because they saw me getting into my husband's car, why would they call me shameless? My husband and I are in a perfectly legal relationship. I went to find my colleague Ava, whom I get along with, and asked her what was going on. She whispered, "You don't know? There's a rumor going around that you stole Lucia's boyfriend, and she caught you red-handed." She was crying in front of the car. I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. Lucia's ability to twist the truth is impressive. Since when did a legal wife become the third party in the relationship? She is the third party. For goodness sake. Too bad for her. Though, she's been trying to meddle, but my husband can't even be bothered to give her a glance. I wasn't interested in addressing such low-level rumors. After all, I'm not planning to stay a mere employee here forever. Once I take over my dad's position, the rumors will naturally fall apart. Why waste time explaining anything? I grabbed my cup and headed to the break room to get some water, but as I approached the door, I heard Lucia's pitiful voice. "I don't know why Olivia has to be so cruel and steal my boyfriend." Someone quickly chimed in. "Why else? She's after his money. Of course, she likes to act like a wealthy socialite, but turns out she's just like that." But it wasn't until I saw you, Lucia, that I realized what a real wealthy and modest girl looks like. I knew that voice all too well. It was Sarah. She always loved competing with me. If I wore Chanel, she'd get the same one. If I carried a Hermes bag, within days, she'd find one just like it. Of course, hers were all knockoffs, but she convinced herself that mine were fake too. So hearing her badmouth me wasn't surprising at all. After overhearing this, I held my head high and walked in. As soon as Lucia saw me, she immediately went silent, her face turning pale. But Sarah, who had been badmouthing me as well, glared at me with disgust and continued with veiled insults. "Ugh, don't you think people who ruin others' relationships are just the worst? I feel sick working in the same company as someone like that." Lucia kept nudging her, signaling her to stop talking. But Sarah, relentless in her mockery, sneered at me. "Why aren't you saying anything? Feeling guilty, are you?" I paused from getting my water and asked, "Why should I feel guilty? You stole someone's boyfriend, and you dare ask why you should feel guilty?" Ignoring her, I turned to Lucia and asked directly, "Lucia, you tell me, did I steal your boyfriend or not?" Lucia hesitated, stammering, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Sarah, still unsatisfied, kept pressing her to speak up and humiliate me. "Lucia, don't be shy. The one who should be ashamed is her for stealing your boyfriend." Lucia pushed her away. "Can you stop already? What does this have to do with you?" She shot me an angry glance and stormed out of the room. Sarah, looking confused, deliberately bumped into me as she left as well. "That's fine. When it's time to settle the score, Sarah will be the first on the list." Chapter 10. During dinner, my husband and I were eating at the table when his phone suddenly rang. I glanced at the screen. It was a WeChat message from Lucia. My husband opened it, and it was a picture. In the picture, I was chatting with a male colleague, and because of the angle, it looked like we were quite close. In reality, we were just discussing work, but Lucia had sneakily taken the photo, worried that my overly jealous husband might misunderstand. I quickly explained, "It's not what it looks like. We were just discussing work." But my husband interrupted me. "Come on, honey, how could I believe such a cheap trick? Besides, with such an amazing husband, how could you possibly be interested in anyone else? I trust you unconditionally." A warm feeling washed over me, and I hugged him around the neck. "You're too adorable. I love you." Then I watched as my husband replied to Lucia. "So, what are you trying to say? Do you think this guy is better than me? Or are you suggesting my wife has poor taste? What's wrong with you?" Lucia responded, "That's not it, big brother. I just saw them looking so close and thought something was off. So I wanted to remind you." My husband replied, "Oh really? Should I send you a banner to thank you? Your attempt to sow discord is so obvious. Do you really think you're clever?" "Lucia, how could you think that way? Big brother, I only want you to be happy. But I'm afraid she might not appreciate you." My husband, whether she appreciates me or not is none of your business. And for the record, I like treating my wife unconditionally well. Even if I end up being her simp, I'd do it willingly. Do you get that? She didn't reply after that. I think my husband's words must have hurt her. What I didn't expect was that the next day at work, Lucia acted as if nothing had happened, without the slightest hint of awkwardness. But her sidekick, Sarah, greeted me with snide remarks. These days, it's amazing how people who steal boyfriends still have the nerve to show their face in public. Lucia, pretending to be virtuous, tried to stop her. Feeling frustrated, I decided to shut her up once and for all. I pulled out my marriage certificate from my bag and threw it in her face. Take a look. That's not Lucia's boyfriend. That's my husband, so whoever's trying to be the third party, it sure isn't me. I suggest you shut your mouth. Sarah glanced at the certificate and froze. She turned to Lucia. You told me the CEO of the group was your boyfriend. What's going on? Lucia flat out denied it. I never said that. You just assumed it yourself. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but she held back, probably because of Lucia's so-called boss's daughter status. By this time, our argument had drawn a crowd of onlookers. Lucia was visibly embarrassed, unable to explain herself, so she just kept crying, making it look like I had done something horribly wrong. But I didn't miss the brief flash of satisfaction and malice in her eyes. Olivia, what's going on? Why are you bullying a colleague? The team leader walked over, not even asking for details before blaming me. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of monsters my dad's company had hired. I asked him, why don't you ask Lucia and Sarah what they did? He ignored me and said bluntly, Olivia, I've already discussed this with the manager yesterday. Due to issues with your personal conduct, the company has decided to terminate your employment. Terminate me? I was stunned. My dad had worked so hard to build this company, and now it was being ruined like this? No investigation, no questions, just firing an employee out of the blue. It was outrageous. I took a deep breath and sat down, looking at him. If you're going to fire me, then bring the manager here. I'll speak to them myself. No need to involve the manager. The reason is simple. Our company doesn't need an employee with poor moral character. I said bring the manager here, or don't blame me if things get ugly. The team leader, Sarah, and Lucia looked at me like I was crazy. Are you out of your mind? Do you think you can just demand to see the department manager whenever you want? Pack up your fake luxury goods and leave before I have to call security. Lucia pretended to be kind. Olivia, you should just go quietly. This isn't my brother's group. Even if things get messy, he won't be able to help you. Oh really? I said with a calm smile. Well, let's see who's actually in charge here. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. Dad, your daughter is being bullied. You should come over. Sarah sneered. Who do you think your dad is? What's he going to do? This is hilarious. Is that so? Well, just don't be too shocked when he gets here. My dear team leader. Chapter 11. While waiting for my dad to arrive, Lucia kept trying to provoke me. Are you going to ask your husband to help you again? I feel like if there's no balance in a marriage, it won't last long. Don't you agree? I responded. He's my husband. How I rely on him is none of your business. What does it have to do with you? He'll dump you sooner or later. Don't worry. Lucia finally dropped her fake facade, her face twisting with malice. You really think that even if he leaves me, he'll choose you? Do you even think you're worthy? I asked her mockingly. And you think you're worthy? You're just a pretty face. What else do you have going for you? Well, it seems like you don't even have that going for you. At the mention of looks, Lucia snapped. She raised her hand to slap me, yelling, You vicious woman. I quickly tried to step back, but I wasn't fast enough. Just as her hand was about to land on my face, I heard a familiar voice. Stop right there. If you dare touch my wife, I'll make sure you regret it. It was my husband, Romeo. Lucia froze in fear and lowered her hand. Romeo stormed over to me, carefully inspecting my face. Once he saw that I wasn't hurt, he let out a sigh of relief. Did she scare you? He asked me. I shook my head, and then he pushed me toward Lucia. She tried to hurt you. So logically, I should help you hit her back. But I don't hit women, so you should return the slap yourself. Don't worry about your hand hurting. I've got some ice prepared for afterward. I whispered to him. Have you gathered all the evidence of their involvement in trafficking? Don't worry, the police have already taken her parents into custody, and they're on their way to arrest Lucia. Go ahead and hit her. 4 days. Romeo had been using the house as bait to stall Lucia's parents while he gathered evidence of their involvement in child trafficking. I looked at Lucia's pale face as she bit her lip, her eyes glistening with tears. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Brother, how can you be so heartless? My husband wasn't moved in the slightest. In fact, he looked impatient. Who told you to bully my wife? And stop calling me brother, it makes me sick. Still refusing to give up, Lucia tried one last desperate plea. Brother, why are you being so cruel to me? It's this woman who's been poisoning your mind, isn't it? My wife is poisoning our relationship. You think you're even worthy? You're not even a fraction of her. Just look at all the horrible things you've done. You said you had nowhere to go, and my wife kindly took you in. But what did you do? You sneaked around wearing my pajamas and posted pictures on Facebook. And that's not all. You've been picking fights with my wife ever since. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Then he turned to me and said, "Don't be soft. Hit her." I certainly wasn't going to go easy on her. As soon as my husband finished speaking, I stepped up and slapped her several times, hard enough to swell her face. She had just tried to hit me earlier. If I didn't strike back, I'd be a fool. Lucia clutched her face and looked at my husband. She dropped her pretense, and in a fit of rage, she screamed, "You really let her hit me? Have you forgotten that when you were kidnapped and almost killed by traffickers, it was my parents who saved you? If it weren't for them, you'd be long dead. And now you repay us with betrayal. You'll face the consequences. Whether they were my saviors, you know the truth better than anyone." My husband replied coldly. His accusation made her stumble back. Terrified, she quickly denied it. "I don't know what you're talking about." My husband scoffed. "Don't deny it just yet, you'll confess soon enough." And then, predictably, she started crying again. It seemed like it would never end. The team leader, clearly intimidated by my husband's presence, wanted to help Lucia but didn't dare to, so he threatened me instead. "Olivia, just you wait. I'm calling the police right now to have you arrested. Let's see who's really getting arrested here," came a familiar voice. I turned and, to my delight, saw my dad. The team leader noticed too and rushed over, eager to please. "Boss, you're here. This woman has been bullying your daughter. I'm calling the police right now to have her arrested." He angrily pointed at me, continuing his accusations. Meanwhile, I noticed Lucia's face turning pale. Of course, she was scared. After all, she was about to be exposed for pretending to be the boss's daughter. How could she not be? My dad, with a casual tone, asked the team leader, "So, you're the one who said you were going to have my daughter arrested?" The team leader opened his mouth, about to explain, but then seemed to realize something. He looked at me with wide eyes. You're the real." I asked him, "Why do you think my last name is the same as the boss's?" He looked like he wanted to bite his tongue off, then started frantically explaining. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were the true daughter of the boss. It was that fraud who deliberately misled me." I ignored his panicked explanations. Clowns like him weren't worth my time. I turned to Lucia. How did it feel, soaking up all that praise while pretending to be the boss's daughter? Chapter 12. Lucia, almost crazed, accused me. "Does it make you happy to see me looking like a clown?" My husband, worried she might lash out, pulled me protectively into his arms. "You're the one with a crooked heart. Who can you blame for that? And no, we don't find it amusing, we just find you as disgusting as a toad. You're constantly haunting me, and it's beyond annoying. I love you so much, and yet you're so heartless. You'll face the consequences." My husband laughed. "Do you love me, or do you love my money? I don't know if I'll ever face consequences, but yours have already arrived." He glanced toward the door, and a few police officers walked in. Lucia, thinking they were her saviors, excitedly pointed at me and the police. "Officer, she assaulted me. Arrest her immediately." The police ignored her and instead asked, "Are you Lucia?" "Yes. You are under suspicion of child trafficking. Please come with us." Lucia lost her composure and shoved the officers. "You've got the wrong person. I've never trafficked children. This has nothing to do with me." The police responded. "Is that so? Your parents just confessed, and they implicated you in the trafficking over the past 2 years." "No, they're lying. Don't believe them." Lucia struggled frantically, but she couldn't overpower the police. As she was being taken away, she glared at me with pure hatred and screamed, "Olivia, you *TCH. This is all you're doing. You've ruined me. You'll get what's coming to you." My husband quickly pulled me into his arms. Shielding me, he calmly replied, "Your family's twisted actions, trafficking so many women and children, have caught up with you. You're facing your own karma. Yet you still want to blame my wife. You're disgusting." Lucia's face twisted even further as she saw how much he was protecting me. Yet she still clung to a sliver of hope and asked, "All these years, was it because I'm a trafficker's daughter that you didn't like me?" My husband spoke clearly. "Even if you weren't involved in human trafficking, I wouldn't spare you a glance. My heart only belongs to my wife. Stop being delusional. You and your parents. Your souls are filthy. Enjoy your time in prison. You've been pretending this whole time, haven't you? All that talk about repaying a debt, you knew the truth from the beginning, didn't you? I'll kill you. You've ruined me." Lucia was so agitated by his words that she started thrashing wildly, nearly breaking free from the officers restraining her. But in the end, she couldn't overpower the police, and they handcuffed her and took her away. As the commotion ended, my dad addressed the employees. "This is my only daughter, and she is the future leader of this company. From now on, follow her guidance." The room erupted in applause as everyone welcomed me to my new role. I glanced around and saw Sarah and the team leader trembling with fear. I used to be frustrated that my dad made me work from the bottom up, but after experiencing all the sycophants and opportunists, I finally understood his wisdom. After the formalities, my dad left to attend to his own matters, and my husband was called to the police station to assist in the investigation of his past kidnapping. The case hadn't been easy to solve, but Lucia's father, desperate for money, had recently kidnapped more children, and my husband's team caught him red-handed. The evidence was undeniable. What surprised me the most was that Lucia had been involved in the trafficking as well. With everything resolved, I turned my attention to Sarah and the team leader. Both of them immediately looked at me with forced smiles, trying to explain. "We're so sorry. It was Lucia who deliberately misled us. That's why we were fooled," Sarah stammered. "I'm sorry. I was just deceived by her. I thought she was the boss's daughter." I asked calmly, "If I weren't my father's daughter, would you still be apologizing to me like this?" They stammered and fumbled for an answer. Their guilt was obvious. These two were nothing but small-minded opportunists. I didn't bother to say another word. I fired them both on the spot. People who play favorites and step on others like this are nothing but trouble for the company. In the company I've taken over, I won't tolerate such small-minded individuals. I also fired the department manager who let Lucia into the company. When someone is fired from our company and blacklisted, it's nearly impossible for them to continue working in the area. I suppose this is just the karma they deserve for their wrongdoing. Chapter 13. A few months later, my husband told me that the family of Lucia had been sentenced. It turned out that it really was their trafficking ring that had kidnapped my husband years ago. But when they saw that, even at a young age, he had an extraordinary presence, they decided to aim for something bigger. Lucia's father stepped in, pretending to be the good guy who rescued him, giving him food and shelter. But in reality, they were filled with malicious intentions. Hoping to reel in a bigger catch, they were truly insatiably greedy. Thankfully, my husband remained clear-headed and never fully trusted them. Most of the money he had given them was recovered as well. What made us even happier was that, through this investigation, many trafficked women and children were rescued thanks to my husband's efforts. It was truly satisfying. When I thought about those women and children who had suffered abuse, my heart ached. Human traffickers deserve the harshest punishment. They should be cut into 1,000 pieces. Later, the prison contacted me, saying Lucia wanted to see me. I refused immediately. There's no reason for me to see her. She was involved in so many cases of child trafficking. She deserves to spend the rest of her life suffering in prison. I only hope she spends her days behind bars in endless regret. After hanging up the phone, I asked my husband, "How were you able to see through Lucia's pretentious coquette act?" My husband replied, "You have to understand. There's no such thing as a high-level pretentious coquette or a truly clueless man. Every man can see through pretentious coquette intentions, some just choose to pretend they don't." I kissed him on the cheek. "You're amazing." I nestled into his arms as he gently rubbed my belly and asked, "Isn't it about time we had a baby?" I nodded and looked up at him. The sunlight streamed in through the window. A small gleam of golden light touched the tip of his nose, and another shimmered on his lips. The cicadas chirped from the sycamore tree outside the window. This was a perfect moment.